All right, today we're talking about a tiny strip of water, but it's so important, so volatile, that if something goes wrong there, it could literally spark a global economic crisis. So yeah, let's get right into it.
So let me ask you something. What if, just overnight, 20% of the world's oil just disappeared? And look, this isn't some crazy movie plot. This is a very real possibility. And it all comes down to one tiny, tiny point on the map. So what would that even look like?
Well, it would look like this. 21 million barrels of oil gone, vanished from the world's supply. And not just once, but every single day. That's how much oil gushes through this one choke point we're going to talk about. And yeah, that's a number that basically holds up the entire global economy. So how is that even possible, right? How can so much depend on one spot? Well, to get that, we've got to look at what a lot of experts call the world's energy artery. It's this one single waterway, and it's the connection between the Persian Gulf, where so much of the oil is, and, well, the rest of us.
And here it is, the Strait of Hormuz. Now, try not to think of it as just, a line on a map. A better way to picture it is like the aorta of the entire global energy system. Seriously, if this thing gets blocked, the whole system basically has a heart attack.
And what's just crazy are the dimensions here. I mean, look at this. At its narrowest point, the whole strait is only about 21 miles wide, which sounds kind of wide, right? But here's the kicker. The actual shipping lanes, the deep parts that these massive supertankers have to stick to, are only about 2 miles wide in each direction. Can you believe that? 20% of the world's oil has to squeeze through that tiny, tiny gap.
So it's that geography, right? That incredibly narrow, can't go around it path. That's exactly what turns this from just a boring shipping lane into one of the most dangerous, high-stakes political hotspots on the entire planet.
I mean, just pull up a map. You'll see it right away. Iran's coastline just looms over the whole strait. And that simple fact of geography gives them incredible leverage. Think about it. If they're ever pushed into a corner, they don't need a giant navy to take on the US. All they have to do is make this one little stretch of water impossible to get through. And there's this quote from an analyst that just perfectly sums up the strategy from their perspective. They said, Iran sees the strait as the hand that hurts the world. It's a way to cause so much economic pain for everyone everywhere that the big global powers would have no choice but to come and talk. And look, this is not just some theoretical war game. This stuff has actually happened. If you look back at the 1980s, during the Iran-Iraq War, you had what they called the Tanker War, where hundreds of ships were attacked. Then in '88, a US warship, the Samuel B. Roberts, hit an Iranian mine, and it almost broke the ship in half. And it's not just ancient history. Even in 2019, there were a series of mysterious attacks on tankers that spiked tensions all over again. The history here is pretty clear. This place has always been a powder keg.
Okay, so let's say it happens. How would they actually do it? How would you shut this thing down? Well, let's get into the playbook because it's not what you might think. It's not some classic naval blockade. It's something way more chaotic. This is really the key to understanding their whole strategy. Iran knows, we all know, they can't win a straight-up fight against the US Navy. It's not going to happen. So the goal is different. It's what military folks call asymmetric. The idea is just to make the waterway so dangerous, so risky, that commercial ships, and more importantly their insurance companies, decide it's not worth it. The goal isn't to win a war, it's to make starting one so painful and expensive for everybody else that no one wants to try. And the number one tool for creating that chaos? Good old-fashioned naval mines. US intelligence figures Iran has something like 6,000 of them. And in a shipping lane this narrow, this crowded, you don't have to sink every tanker. You just have to plan a few, create an incident or two, and sow enough fear that all that traffic just stops. And we're not talking about those spiky black balls you see in old cartoons. Their arsenal is way more advanced. I mean, look at some of these. You've got mines that sit silently on the bottom of the sea and then fire a rocket-propelled warhead up into a ship's hull. You've got others that are triggered by the sound or the magnetic signature of a ship passing overhead. All this variety makes finding and clearing them a total nightmare. But the mines are just layer one. The playbook is much deeper. We're talking swarms of small, super-fast attack boats firing missiles. We're talking kamikaze drones aimed right at a tanker's bridge. Then you have anti-ship missiles hidden along the coast. They can even jam GPS signals to confuse ships, make them drift off course into Iranian waters, and then they just seize them. The whole point is to create chaos from every direction. Okay, so imagine that playbook gets activated. what happens next? Well, the fallout isn't just going to be some regional skirmish. The consequences would be instantaneous, and they would be global. Let's follow that shockwave. First thing that happens, like within minutes, the price of oil. It wouldn't just go up, it would explode. Analysts think in a full shutdown, you could see prices jump from, say, $65 a barrel to over $150, maybe even higher. And not over months, we're talking within days. In fact, one market analyst put it very simply. They called it, quote, the biggest oil shock in history. Yeah, bigger than the famous oil crises back in the 70s that people still talk about. Our modern global economy just isn't designed to handle that kind of sudden jolt. And this is where it stops being about geopolitics and starts being about your wallet. Let's walk through it. So the strait closes. Instantly, the world's oil supply takes a nosedive. Then, insurance costs for any ship going anywhere near that area just go to the moon. All those new costs get passed on, which means global inflation spikes. And what does that mean? It means the money you have is suddenly worth less. So yeah, this isn't just some abstract number on a news ticker. This translates directly to what you pay at the gas station. It translates to higher food prices, because guess what? Farms and delivery trucks run on fuel. It's a real threat to jobs and the economy, not just in one country, but everywhere. That's why this little strip of water matters to literally everyone. But here's the really weird part, the paradox of the whole situation. Closing the strait might be Iran's nuclear option, their most powerful weapon, but it's also a form of economic suicide. And that creates this bizarre strategic trap where there's no good move for anybody. Just look at both sides of the coin here. For the West, a war to force the strait back open would be unbelievably expensive. We're talking maybe $1 billion a day just for the US, plus all the chaos back home from crazy high gas prices and inflation. But for Iran, it's just as bad. Closing the strait means they cut off their own ability to export their oil, which is their main source of income. And it also blocks the ships bringing in the food and goods they need to import. So you might be thinking, well, why don't they just go around it? And yeah, there are a couple of big pipelines that Saudi Arabia and the UAE built for exactly this reason, to bypass the strait. But here's the problem. Just look at the math. Together, they can move about 8.5 million barrels a day, which, okay, is a lot, but it's not even close to the 21 million barrels that need to get through the strait. It helps, for sure. It softens the punch, but it absolutely cannot prevent a full-blown crisis. And that right there, that's the core of the whole problem. It's basically a situation of, well, mutually assured economic destruction. Pulling the trigger and closing the strait hurts everybody so badly, including the one who pulls it, that it just creates this incredibly dangerous stalemate. Nobody wants to escalate, but nobody can really de-escalate without looking weak. So we kind of end up right back where we started. You have all this mind-bending complexity, all this global interdependence, all this potential for a massive conflict, and it all gets funneled down into this one tiny 21-mile-wide piece of ocean. It really makes you step back and ask a much bigger question, doesn't it? The question about the entire global system we've built. Just how fragile is the whole thing, really?